Hey everybody, this is part of our full-length primetime podcast. You can check it out on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, YouTube, plenty more. I hope you enjoy.
Well, Brandon, let's move on into our next topic, and we are officially moving on from college basketball. It's in the rearview mirror. Bye, basketball. Hope you find your dad.
Thanks, Mr. Narwhal.
I love that movie.
It's a great movie.
I love Elf. Great movie. Amazing movie. Can't wait for December. But really, I can, because I want to get to football season, which is what we're getting to right now, Brandon. We are now in football mode from now until pretty much eternity, and we are going to be talking football again here on the Primetime Podcast, and we got a doozy for you. We're talking, for the rest of the podcast, all quarterbacks. And in this segment, Brandon, we're going to take a look at Lamar Jackson. We're taking a look at Louisville, and I'm going to hit you with an easy one. I'm going to try to throw a softball, throw a nice changeup right over the middle of the plate for you. You ready? Can Lamar Jackson lead Louisville to the college football playoff this year?
Well, Ricky, it's an interesting question.
So it was a fastball. That's what you're saying. 95-mile-an-hour heat right down the middle.
It's an interesting question. I think that you look at what he did last season, and no doubt, and no one can deny that Lamar Jackson was outstanding. Mm-hmm. He was outstanding. I mean, you don't win the Heisman Trophy without being outstanding, and he was in so many games. And he racked up touchdowns like it was nobody's business on the ground and throwing through the air. But you know what he did not do is he did not get Louisville to the Final Four. He did not get them to the college football playoff. And what is there to think that in a season when he may not be as good as what he was last year, because typically you win the Heisman Trophy, you're not going to, go and repeat, and you're probably not going to have as good a statistics as you did the year before. What makes anyone think that he is going to get his team to the college football playoff this year, especially when things may not be as good for Louisville as they were last year? Offensive line that may not be all that great. Could be shaky there. We saw in some games in the game, specifically Virginia, he did not play well at all. And it was against Virginia. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're not talking basketball anymore. We're talking football, Virginia. They're nothing special. And he really struggled. And Lamar Jackson, towards the end of the season, overall really struggled. He was not what he was at the beginning of the season. If you take the first half of the season, wow. Those stats were phenomenal. You take the last half of the season, and you just see a normal quarterback. So I think that to ask the question is an interesting question. It's a great question. But I think for anyone to say, yeah, right off the bat, yep, he'll be able to lead them to the college football playoff. What do you have behind you to say that absolutely, without a doubt, he'll be able to do it, when even in his Heisman Trophy season, he couldn't do it?
I almost want to say yes, he will. And the reason why is I look at last year, and amazing year for Action Jackson. However, there were two things that really fell in the way for him. Number one, the October 1st game against Clemson. As soon as he lost to Clemson, no way he was getting to the playoff, because there was no way Clemson was going to let Louisville get ahead of them again. I know Clemson ended up losing late to Pitt, but that was number one. Number two was losing to Houston. As soon as they lost to Houston, season was over. You saw it that next week with the Kentucky game where, yeah, it was a close 41-38 game, but at the end of it, it was like, well, this game really means nothing. We know in the ACC that we're not going to win the ACC. I thought they didn't have that same fire that they had earlier in the season. And really it comes down to those two games to me. Clemson, who was at Clemson, and then at Houston. So two road games to me kind of wrote that season to a T, even though it was an amazing season for Lamar Action Jackson. However, I look at this year, and they have some big games. They didn't play North Carolina last year, They get North Carolina this year. Actually, it's their first ACC game.
And it's game 2 of the season.
And it's game 2 of the season. But here's the thing. I'm looking at their schedule, and I know it's early. Like Clemson, I'm going to get to them in a second because I feel like they're a little bit of a piece in this cog. But spring games are just going. Like Clemson's having their spring game this Saturday. So we are still very early. We're in spring ball right now. But I look at the schedule. Purdue, I think they can beat. Kent State, I think they can beat. Murray State, I think they beat. I know, shockers, right? NC State, I think they beat. Boston College, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Virginia. I think they get the win. Am I saying they're going to blow them out 63-13? No. But I'm confident right now in the spring game that they get those wins. I look at the important ones. North Carolina, Clemson, and Florida State. Kentucky all depends on where they're at heading into the ACC heading into that game. But I look at North Carolina, lost Mitch Trubisky. Their quarterback for this year will probably be the transfer from LSU, Brandon Harris. I'm not scared of Brandon Harris. Now I know that that could change because let's see what happens in the spring. Let's see how he looks in Fedora's offense in that North Carolina system, which is vastly different than Ed Orgeron and his offensive system down there in LSU. I know my Ed Orgeron is nothing compared to Brandon Swanson and your impersonation of good old Ed Orgeron. But I'm not scared of Brandon Harris right now. Then you get to Clemson, and I feel like saying these words, I'm going to get them shoved right up my rear end at the end of the season because that's usually what happens. I predict something and the opposite happens.
It goes completely the opposite way, yeah.
I'm gonna use a quote here from Athlon Sports. I'm looking at their article, and they said here, they're talking about the quarterback job, how somebody needs to take over. They say, but somebody will be taking snaps when Kent State comes to Death Valley on September 2nd, and this spring will be the first test for all those candidates. I look at what we got. Right now, it's probably like if I had to put a name to a job, Kelly Bryant would probably be the guy. But you also have Zarek Cooper, who could win that job away from Kelly Bryant. You also have a freshman in Hunter Johnson. I don't think they go with a freshman filling in for Deshaun Watson. But those two teams, North Carolina, Clemson, first two ACC teams that they play this year, that quarterback is really going to have their game going because guess what? Lamar Jackson will have his game going. Louisville does not have to worry about that quarterback. However, the offensive line that you mentioned could be the question mark coming into that. If you get through those two guys, really the big question for this entire ACC becomes who's going to be the better quarterback? Lamar Jackson, and when I say better quarterback, I mean in winning games. Lamar Jackson or FSU's Francois? Who's going to be it? And I think really this season, the ACC will come down to October 21st at Tallahassee when Lamar Jackson comes to town to play Florida State. That's going to be the game we all watch and signifies whether or not Louisville will be a college football playoff team.
I think it's very important with the quarterback situation, and I think that you bring up a really good point in the fact of Brandon Harris. How scared are you really of him? He really wasn't anything special over at LSU, but a change of scenery is always good for players, so it could certainly help him. And then Clemson, you're not having Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson, obviously, an incredible talent and an outstanding quarterback there at Clemson, and you don't know who's going to fill in for him. So right now you kind of have the question mark there, and then of course you have DeAndre Francois at Florida State, and I think that right now, obviously, right off the bat, you look Francois, he's the best quarterback out of those three teams where you're questioning two of the quarterbacks, and I think though is you have to look beyond just the quarterback. You have to look and see what else do they have. You know, how's Louisville's defense going to be this season? You know, they would put up 50, 60 points, but their defense did a pretty good job of holding people. Is their defense going to be the same exact way? Are they going to be able to win 63-13 too many times this season? And then you have to look also on the other sides for Clemson, North Carolina, and Florida State. And talking about these three teams specifically, because these are the three teams that Ricky and I agree with you, Ricky, is that we've looked and identified as being the teams that really are going to pose the biggest threat.
Especially they're all in the Atlantic. They're all on the same side. To
Louisville. And not to say that any of the other teams will not, but these are the three teams that we have picked out right now early on that will. And I think that you have to look, what else are they going to have? Are they going to be good running teams? Are they going to have, some big wide receivers? Those are all types of things. Who are the other playmakers around just the quarterback? Because for Louisville, as good of guys they may have had around the football, no one knew about them because all they knew is Lamar Jackson. He did basically all of it by himself for a long part of the season, for a good part of the season. But that's where else I'm looking. That's why I don't think you can just jump right in and say, yes, he's going to get his team to the college football playoff, because there are so many question marks still around Louisville as a team and what Lamar Jackson will do, coming off of his Heisman Trophy season. And then what else are these other teams going to do? What are the improvements that they're making? How are their defenses going to be? I think those are all the questions that you have to ask yourself right off the bat. And because of that, you cannot just say yes. You can be inclined to say yes, but you can't just say yes. I think that they will be a college football playoff team only because... Well, how can they be? They weren't even one last year. That's my biggest argument, is that he had such an outstanding season, yet they're not there. They weren't even close to being there. They lost their big games that they needed to win. Now, it's one thing for a Penn State to make an argument, hey, why aren't we there? Louisville couldn't even make an argument.
No,
they weren't anywhere close.
Well, it wasn't even just... It was really what done them in when it came to the argument of that second team. As soon as they lost to Houston, they were done. Like, the Clemson one was, okay, we're not going to win the ACC. They lost to Houston, and it was, well, we're not making the playoffs. Our season's done. And like I said, it showed in that Kentucky game. I thought that it was one of those ones where Kentucky came in with a little bit more fire. But one quarterback I do want to throw out and mention that I forgot to mention for the Tigers, and I hope I'm going to get this name right, is Nick Schuessler. I hope I said that name right. I probably didn't. Redshirt senior, also another name to throw out there in the mix with this situation. And that's the big thing. And that's why I love having these conversations so early, because it's one of those things where there's still a lot of questions, because with questions, Brandon, comes discussion, and that's where we can have and we can talk about these different things. And in my mind, I still feel at this point, this side of the ACC, the Atlantic is what I'm talking about, is going to come down to Clemson, it's going to come down to Louisville, and it's going to come down to Florida State. Those are going to be the three ones. And I know what you're saying, Ricky. Wow, bold prediction there, that those are going to be the three teams fighting for the top of the Atlantic in the ACC. But let me throw out this for you. Let's say Louisville does win the Atlantic. You know what other team they might have to worry about? That they might have to come when we get to the Coastal? A team that I think, now that Mitch Trubisky's not at North Carolina, they are a much better option to win the Coastal? Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech could come out and win the Coastal. And let's say Louisville does get past Florida State. They get past Clemson. They get past North Carolina. Could Virginia Tech be the team standing there and being like, and I'm going to throw my nerdy set out there, Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, thou shall not pass, puts down the staff and just stops Louisville right in their tracks in the ACC title game? Could that happen when we get to the end of the season?
Well, they almost did it with Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Virginia Tech is an underrated team. They certainly were last season, I think. And I think that people kind of started to see, wow, this team's pretty good when they stood in Clemson's way and almost beat them at the end of the season.
Almost knocked them out of the playoff.
And that would have been a huge win for Virginia Tech. It wouldn't have done them anything because they wouldn't have gotten into the playoff, but it would have probably kicked out Clemson. And I think that the point you make is an interesting one because of that. And that's talking about them going up against a really, really good Clemson team. And could they be someone who is going to try and duke things out this season in that conference? And yeah, they could be. They're obviously, we didn't mention them because they're not on the schedule for Louisville.
But they could be.
They are on the schedule for Clemson. And I think that that's definitely a team to take a look at and a team to not write off. That's for sure. So Virginia Tech could certainly be another team that you look at and say, hey, they have made some strides. They could definitely pose a threat in the ACC conference.
And that'll be, I'm looking at Virginia Tech's schedule. That's going to be the first ACC game for the Hokies will be September 30th when they play Clemson. I believe Clemson is going to Virginia Tech in that game, whereas Clemson, they will already, at Louisville's their first ACC game, then they play Boston College before playing Virginia Tech. And the big thing right now is with Clemson, and the reason why I'm not saying, like, yes, they will defend and win the Atlantic is because the quarterback question. I feel like it's way too big right now, and I want to see this Saturday what we get from the spring game, because the spring game is really my first barometer of, boom, this is football, because this is exactly what happens, guys. College basketball season ends on Monday. Spring games, there are some that have, I believe, happened already. Like this Saturday, I will watch some of the spring games going on. I will kind of start digesting, getting ready for the next football season. But to kind of end this conversation and kind of segue it into our other one, because this one's going to be the segue conversation, which gets us to our bigger football conversation to end the podcast. Right now, if you had to give a definitive answer of what you're feeling, not a like, yes, they will, no, they won't, but a, do you think or do you feel that Lamar Jackson could lead his Louisville Cardinals to the college football playoff? Do you see that? Do you envision that in your mind, Louisville and Lamar Jackson in the CFP?
I don't envision that. And again, I mean, it's kind of because of what I talked about at the beginning. I think that if he kept up the play that he did, he reminds me a little bit. He doesn't, but what happened with him a little bit. But it all happened in one season with him as opposed to one good. Well, just hear me out. So Lamar Jackson, really, really good at the beginning, kind of slows down towards the end. Then you have a Leonard Fournette, kind of, where was he? Was he really, really good in the beginning and slowed down at the end, or was he really, really kind of nowhere in the beginning and then really sped up at the end?
The only thing I remember from him last season is that Ole Miss game.
Not last season. I was going to say the season he had that was really, really good.
That was, 2 years ago.
He he just kept going off and going off and going off and going off and going off. And then he has the season the next year. Injury happens, not doing all that well. He's not playing as well as what he had before. And sometimes that hype and everything, and again, he had an injury, but sometimes it's hard to overcome. I thought it was going to be hard for Deshaun Watson to overcome. He was able to overcome it. Now, if Lamar Jackson can overcome that hype, and there'll be plenty of it, I think that there's an opportunity for him to be really good once again, but I think be more of a solid, let's spread this wealth around, be more of a balanced type team. I think that there's an opportunity there. But overall, if you're asking me right now, and I'm giving you my answer of no, I do not think he's going to do that, because I'm looking at too many other teams out there that I think are going to be very, very good. And I just do not see Louisville being at the top of that list.
I'm going to say this. Can I envision it and have that thought in my head? Yes, I can. I can see Louisville as one of the teams that we see in the college football playoff. Do I think it's going to happen? I'm kind of on the fence about it. And the reason why is you got to see what solidifies in that Clemson quarterback position. And then really to me, it's going to come down to, of course, as we get to the season, I will have an actual prediction on this. But right now at this point in the spring, I think it's going to, I have a weird feeling, Brandon, that this is what's going to happen. He'll beat Brandon Harris in North Carolina. He'll beat whoever the starting quarterback is for Clemson and the Tigers. And then he'll beat Kent State, Murray State, the Wolfpack, the Eagles. And then we'll get to October 21st. And he'll go to Tallahassee. And that will be the game that really decides, are you going to be a playoff team this year? Or are you not? That's going to be the one that we all focus in on. I'm calling it right now. College game day will be in Tallahassee that week. That will be the game that college game day is at, because everyone will be talking about it. The Seminoles hosting the Cardinals, because if the Cardinals, I'll be saying it, if the Cardinals win that game, they're for sure got an open road to winning the Atlantic and going to the ACC title game. That's just how I'm picturing it in my head right now. But as always, this is not just what we think, it's what you guys think as well. So let us know down in the comment section, what do you guys think about Louisville? What do you guys think about the ACC? Can Lamar Jackson lead his Louisville Cardinals to the college football playoff this upcoming season?
Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed a lot of emotion. If you want more, click this video right over my left shoulder. You will certainly not regret it.